I am now recording on OBS, and is my mute?
Yep,
Yep,
your mute button worked.
it's working. Yay! I'm happy for that. Uh, Whenever you're ready, Jan.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Breaking Geek Radio, the podcast, the flagship and international podcast of LRM Online and the Genreverse Podcast Network. I say that really high pitch because at this point, there's no international folks here, but there's also no one else here other than producer Kyle on the ones and twos helping me out and getting the show out here for all of you to enjoy. Nick today is MIA. Danny will be showing up a little bit later today to discuss our review for this episode, which is the new horror comedy thriller flick, M3GAN, which is about a killer doll, another amazing killer AI doll movie. It's definitely its own genre, and it's definitely been making a buzz over the past week since its release. And Blumhouse continues to do amazing things for the film industry, which is kind of partially what I thought as I was watching the whole movie. Sounds really extreme, probably is really extreme, but I'm happy to talk about that later on in the episode. So for starters, we got a few short stories to talk about before we dive right into the main meat of this podcast, which will be a discussion between me and Danny. And I'm interested to see how it goes because it sounds like him and I have relatively different opinions about what the movie has to offer and what audiences can expect from it. I'm wondering how that will go, but let's jump right into the main news topic, or the first main news topic, and that has to do with Batman 2, or The Batman 2. As we know, last year, The Batman came out from director Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson, and
Pattinson, woo!
Pattinson, as it were. I remember there was this brief period in time when Jonesy tried to get ahead of the curve and come up with a, like Batfleck, Pattinson, that type of thing.
Right.
He said Bob Bat, and I'm like, that's not going to catch on.
No,
that's not going to catch on. I know.
Pattinson is perfectly fine.
Pattinson is perfect. Mm-hmm. And anyways, great movie. It's still a movie I want to revisit, ironically enough. I think it might be the best made Batman movie to date. It's so well paced. The filmmaking manages to be dark without being that annoying Sabrina, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, or Game of Thrones dark, where you just can't see what's happening, which I hate. So you could see everything that happened to the Batman, but it's still very, very dark. But let's not talk about Batman. We're not here to talk about reviewing Batman. We're here to anticipate the amazing things to come in the Batman 2, which, in case you were worried, is actually happening. Even though James Gunn came in and is cleaning house, it has been pretty much confirmed that they are continuing with the Batman 2. And Reeves said in a recent interview, look, I'm excited to hear what they're going to do, referring to the whole DC universe. The Batverse thing, as James Gunn has said, and as Peter Safran has said, is kind of its own thing they're letting us do. So if you were worried about that potentially interfering with the Batman franchise, don't. It's going to be great. It's going to continue to be a thing. And personally, I think it's going to be great because Matt Reeves continues to be, probably in my opinion, one of the most interesting high budget filmmakers currently working. Yes, you obviously have a lot of amazing filmmakers in the works. I mean, the Russo brothers did amazing work on Avengers, Endgame, and Infinity War, and the Captain America movies. But when it comes to somebody with like an actual fingerprint on a big budget property, especially in the Marvel side of things, it gets increasingly hard to do. But then when you look at the DC side of things, there is a bit more fingerprint there, but they're becoming a little bit more samey. I'd say Zack Snyder certainly has the biggest fingerprint of all of the DC movies that are over $150 million in budget. So anyways, I'm just happy to see filmmakers continue to take creative risks in big budget films. But with regards to what we can expect, well, first of all, it's been confirmed that he is currently writing with a partner for the next Batman film. Now the question is, where do they go from here? What happens next? who are they going to bring in to the Batman universe? Speaking with Collider, he had mentioned before that there's actually a whole little fabric of things we're wanting to do, the way we're doing with the Penguin and how that comes back into how that will lead into a sequel and what the sequel is going to be. So two things. A, it does sound like this Penguin series is going to segue into whatever the Batman 2 is, which is relatively unique. Like, they aren't kidding when it comes to the Batverse. This is going to be not just its own little side thing, but a side thing that actually has an impact. So it really is its own little pocket universe, which I think is pretty cool. And one other thing with regards to this movie, though, is it sounds like he's going to narrow the focus. He's going to continue to narrow the focus of the story so that it doesn't get out of hand, so to speak. Here's what he had to say. To me, the thing that I really feel is that I also believe that Rob Pattinson is so special in the role. My goal has always been to do these point of view stories that allow the character to always be the emotional center of the story. Because a lot of time what happens is after you do the first one, then suddenly other rogues gallery characters come in and they kind of take over. And then Batman takes a backseat to sort of a character backseat sort of character-wise or emotionally. I love The Dark Knight, but I think that might be that might fall into this category a bit. You can argue that I'm trying to think of what the emotional arc could have been for Bruce Wayne in that movie. And I don't know if there is one. It very much was a story that was more interested into what the Joker brought to the table, and I guess the idealistic clash, but it seemed definitely more interested in the Joker's perspective himself, however you say that. And in this one, it sounds he's almost taken a Marvel approach, which I think is a great idea. Make sure that everything that happens in the story is all in service of the emotional center. And that emotional center going forward will continue to be the Batman. I think it's what set his movie apart from all the others. It really was focused most emotionally on kind of the emo Batman, for lack of a better term. He definitely was one of the most realistic portrayals of a shut-in billionaire who lost his family. And I'm interested to see his character continue to grow. He learned over the course of that movie that he does not need to be vengeance. He needs to be hope. And I don't know if we had an arc as powerful as that in any other Batman movie to date. And so the fact that he's continuing to keep that focus there, I think personally is a good sign, and it makes me very, very happy going forward.
I'm just gonna got a question. Where are you reading all that from?
There are several quotes. One is from Collider. One is from Variety.
Did you collect them all yourself?
I did.
Because I had the Collider, I had the LRM article and opened up the Collider. I wasn't aware you were going to be reading from other things, so I didn't have the proper quotes as Jammer was reading. So I just wanted, so everyone knows where you were getting different things from.
Yeah, so watching, apologies. So one of them was from Collider, one of them was from Variety, and one of them was from Yahoo. Which, let's see here, what Yahoo? Was it actually Yahoo? It was Nerdist. You know how now Yahoo, they tend to brand themselves at Yahoo, but it's actually from like another outlet that's just a partner. So those were the three quotes. I mean, since you're on here, just quick, do you have any thoughts about what I've just said about where Batman should go, and do you like what he has to say about the focus?
So yeah, I agree. One of the issues is that in general, because the way he was created, why and how he was created, Batman doesn't have much more emotion other than my parents were killed and I'm going to do the right thing. So being posed with the stuff that he was set against in the Dark Knight, for example, how far are you willing to go? Will you let one person die to save another? Can you keep the darkness in check? That only goes so far, which is why I think a lot of people look to the villains for more engaging story. You think of even the atrocity that it may be. You think about Freeze in Batman. What was that, Batman and Robin? Yeah, Batman Forever, No,
No, it's
Batman
in
and Robin.
Robin.
Batman and Robin. Yeah, you look at Freeze. You look at Joker. You look at even Riddler. Sort of, just barely in this one, but they did it so masterfully where it's like, nah, dude's just batshit crazy. Pun intended. I do think that introducing some more villains, especially in the background, people that Bat might be putting away, is a smart idea. And I think building up to some sort of Arkham Asylum escape situation where in a third movie he's dealing with multiple villains might eventually be the way to go. But then but so long as you still balance it as a Batman story.
Yeah, and I think the first one did a really good job between the balance between the Penguin and
Riddler
Falcone
and
Falcone and Riddler, and there were characters. They were there. It felt like a lived-in world, but it was still very much a Batman-centric story. It was about his character arc.
Yeah, Manny
and he did a good job of balancing that.
Manny had mentioned that this movie is just a little too grounded for a character like Freeze or a Clayface. I mean, how do you feel? What villains do you think work for this Batman, and do you think any don't work for this world? Because I mean, it does look like a pretty grounded, you're not going to see cryo beams type world, you know. I don't know. What do you think?
You know, I might disagree, because I feel like the first movie was relatively isolated. And even though it was grounded, it was still very stylized. So I could see there being kind of a natural expansion outward as the stories continue. That we'll see, well, this particular world, this Gotham, it may have its grounded elements, but its weirdness extends beyond just visuals, because it doesn't feel like our world. Do you agree with that? I don't think it feels like our world at all.
I mean,
I think it feels like a grounded version.
Kind of feels like our world.
Fantastic. Really? It doesn't feel like that
as
at all.
As far
to
as
me.
like just how awful people are, how gritty things are, how desperate people can get. I mean, yeah, it does kind
on
of
an
feel
emotional
like our
level,
world.
but like if you look at that world, I don't say, oh yeah, that's our world.
Yeah, it feels like our world. You got a really bright outlook on the world right
now.
No.
I'm not talking about emotionally. I'm talking about visually. Visually, when you look at
it.
Like this doesn't look like for me, the Dark Knight trilogy, that's our world.
Yeah, I can kind of
objectively
see that.
That is our world. This one is a hyper stylized,
what I've always
gritty reality.
What I saw,
but that doesn't mean there isn't weird shit.
What I saw in this when I was in theaters was Reeves has 1 foot in Nolan's universe, Nolan's world, and 1 foot in Burton's world, where he wanted to borrow certain feels of Burton's Gotham, some of the closeness and crowdedness, some of the color, not all of it. He made it feel very, very. He made it feel as if Burton's Batman was more realistic, kind of, sort of, if that makes sense. And I dug it. I really did. I'm not a Batman guy. You know this. Shit. Yeah. I hadn't even seen all of the Dark Knight trilogy when I started working at LRM.
I didn't know that. I forgot about that.
I think we had conversations about it before. Yeah, of course. It was a principle thing. It was something I was holding over with friends.
That was stupid.
You remember? It was stupid as hell. It doesn't matter. I stuck with it.
Doesn't matter. I won.
Not really, because I ended up watching them. But no, it did good, man. I'm hoping that it continues to do well. I kind of see Manny's point, but I can see them. You're not going to end up with a freeze ray the way you see in comics or even Batman and Robin, but the idea of cryo weapons, I'm not completely unheard of.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to see like a really weird, hyper realistic version of what a Freeze person could be, or a gritty, grounded version on what Mr. Freeze could be, and how that story can play out. I could see Mr. Freeze happening personally pretty easily. I don't know if it will. I'm trying to think if there are any villains that I don't know if there are any villains I could think of off the top of my head that won't work. Ironically enough, one, maybe Ra's al Ghul Or no, because I disagree in myself. I
It's
just
just an
disagreed with
assassin.
myself.
You don't have to deal with the whole immortality aspect too much.
It's less about the assassin and more about everything in this version of Batman just feels so isolated. And I feel like bringing in Ra's al Ghul may expands it outward more than I feel like this story wants to cover or this version wants to cover. But who knows? Who
A lot
knows?
of
I
people
don't think there's anything.
people, including Manny, think going the route of Hush and the stories in and around that.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that they're having a lot of the organized crime aspects of it, a lot of the like human people with just really good connections and good
Money.
ideas that are bad, of course, awful meanness. I think we're gonna see
Meanness.
like the villains. The villains are. I think you're gonna see less fantastical, very similar to Nolan's. But we'll see.
Yeah. Either way, I'm excited, and I just am really happy that he's keeping it emotionally focused. But the downside of that, and I guess here's when I have to mention the downside, is that it will inevitably lead to either fewer villains or they're going to dive less into those villains in each of these movies. Because I always just think back to the Marvel phases 1 through 3 and how they were very focused on the main characters. Like everything in the story was in service of a main character, and not just the main character, but their emotional arc in that single film, to the point where we just got like little bits and pieces of well-known villains, but not much to sink our teeth into. And then we even got sidekick characters who I thought we would have been really, oh, I'm ready for them to be, the leads now. And still, people are still wondering, man, can Sam Wilson, I keep doing that. Sam Wilson be the next Captain America? Will that make, $800 million at the box office? Are people going to be wanting to see that? Because the other movies were so hyper focused on Cap's emotional arc, everyone else was just kind of like a supporting character. And that's one of the downsides when you have a film versus a TV show, is it doesn't allow for building out a cast of supporting characters as effectively. And considering the rogues gallery in Batman, that could certainly be a negative thing. But I have faith in Matt Reeves. He's an amazing storyteller and filmmaker, and he's also using the medium of television in the Penguin series. So who knows? He might be able to circumvent that by building out his Batverse through various television shows in addition to the Batman series. But speaking of let's talk about Black Panther 3. Do you like that transition there? Black Panther 2 came out, left admittedly not as much of a social impact as the first one. It had its hurdles to overcome with the death of Chadwick Boseman. And on the whole, I think most would agree it was fairly successful in being respectful to his legacy and kind of pushing things on to the next level. I personally had my problems with the movie with regards to its lack of focus and it really not settling on a main character until the later part of the story, which I think led to an overall weaker emotional arc for Shuri. But regardless of what you think about Black Panther, that movie was still very financially successful. Definitely not as financially successful as the first one, but and I feel like you need to repeat this constantly. Just because something did not do as good as the original does not mean it's not a success. Given the budget of this movie, chances are it was profitable after $500 to $600 million. It's made well over that. It's made over 100 plus, maybe a couple $100 million for Disney in profit. So that's just printing money. That's all golden. So needless to say, Black Panther 3 was on the horizon, and Letitia Wright, who plays Shuri in Black Panther 2, recently said, hey, they're working on Black Panther 3, but it might take a while to get here. She didn't go into details as to why it might take a while. Maybe Ryan Coogler's busy. Maybe, who knows? But I doubt she even knows because she's an actor, and actors don't get told anything regarding it. But I guess the exciting part is if you were a fan of Shuri and what her emotional arc was, And now that she's claimed the mantle of the Black Panther, what is next for her? What can we expect from her? It sounds like whatever the next story is will likely tackle that. I just think it's kind of interesting now that I think about it, where the first movie and the second movie were relatively different, but both of them were essentially stories about members of royalty accepting the responsibility of the Black Panther. That was the first one, and in another way, that was the second one. But yeah, I just think it's kind of cool. But yeah, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add to this other than I really hope that now that we have settled in with Shuri as the main character of the franchise, that we can really focus in on whatever her arc is in the next movie and help make it feel more cohesive. And I know we're also going to be getting I believe the Disney Plus series, if I'm not mistaken, for what was it called? What is the Disney Plus series called?
They don't have like an official name for.
Is it about the Dora Milaje or something, right?
So that's, as far as I'm aware, there is no real official information on anything. It's all like rumor, conjecture. Now there's a rumor that the Wakanda based show will feed into the Midnight Angels instead. So kind of like a spy thriller focused with a lot of characters from Wakanda, not just Okoye or anything like that, not just the guard. It's going to be more expansive than that, including the characters that you saw in the suits from Wakanda Forever. Yeah.
In the Super Sentai suits.
Yes.
I love those. What did you watch Black Panther? You did, right?
Yes.
What did you think of the Super Sentai suits?
You
didn't like it. I loved it. I thought it was so
cool.
Because for me, I was worried that, especially when you look at Ironheart, that it would feel too much like Iron Man. But this is like, no, it's literally Super Sentai Japanese inspired suits. I think it's kind of cool.
Kind of, sort of. I feel and part of this could be because of the CGI budget, which there isn't much, one, because Disney Plus is expensive and it's not profitable. Streaming is not sustainable. Haha, told you so. But I think if they had better texture and lighting for them, it may have been a bit better. My issue, of course, is that this is a connected universe. There's a certain aesthetic for this connected universe, and while I'm all for people being able to play with their color palettes and some style and stuff, I don't like it if something super connected all of a sudden feels very disconnected. And again, I'm saying part of it, I think, is not just the aesthetic was different, but the effects themselves weren't up to par. There may be a way to fix it to where it feels more part of the universe. Ironheart being different, you really do expect that, simply because of her being a younger kid. She's not a 40, 50-year-old, billionaire when Stark started. So I get it, but yeah, it was a little rough for different reasons other than just I feel like kind of kiddie looking of it.
I think the Black Panther series also does have a history of just bad CG, unfortunately.
Yeah, the final fight in the first film. One. Yeah. That was rough.
I think for me, that's just Marvel. You're gonna have some shoddy CGI. Infinity War had the infamous Hulkbuster stuff with
Ruffalo's head.
Name? Yeah, Ruffalo's head popping out of there, and it was just
awful.
There's just so many aspects of that. It's like when you're producing on a level that they are, and you kind of have an assembly line of production, there are things that fall through the cracks. You also have filmmakers wanting to make changes last minute that result in the pipeline of visual effects artists working on things last minute and extensively, and it's kind of expected.
Not having as much of a budget to hire more or
well, not as much of a budget. Just I don't think it has to do with budget. I think it has to do with timeline.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Well. If you had and I'm slightly joking, slightly being tongue in cheek, because this movie wouldn't have been as affected as I think future projects are of that multi-billion-dollar hole in Disney's money from the direct to customer services. It's just like when people were talking about some of the things that Warner Brothers had going on. It's like, curse Discovery for this. It's like, guys, these problems are why Discovery bought Warner Brothers. Like these problems are why Warner Brothers was trying to be spun off and purchased, was because it had a giant hole where money should be. And you can't necessarily blame the people that bought it for that stuff. But yeah, it's nuanced, like all things.
And for me, as far as the CG thing, when it regards to Black Panther, it's just, or Marvel in general, I just expect it, because when you have the assembly line or as many productions going on at once, what is it, like 10 at a time? I feel like. You have deadlines you have to hit, otherwise the whole thing cascades downwards. So
it's almost like
you make last minute creative decisions that results in having last minute CG changes, which results in the CG not being completed as well. You don't get the fine tuning you would get of something to say like
almost
the Batman, which isn't reliant on anything and can finish until it's done almost.
It's almost like trying to fill Disney Plus up to get subscribers to stick around, watered down the MCU in a way. And I know for some people, CGI might not bug them.
It doesn't bother me,
but
I
for
can
others, especially when it's so noticeable that it really like the Hulk thing and or Hulkbuster armor in Infinity War. Yeah, and you're talking about such a great freaking movie too, filled with so many awesome moments. And you guys are so screwed now. Should have been a really awesome moment to help, with the Thor entrance to Wakanda, but it takes you out of it, and the only thing you can see is Mark Ruffalo standing on a stool in front of a green screen. It's rough sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that. Luckily, I am not cursed with such trivialities. Obviously, I notice it, but I overlook it. Yet what?
Well, I'm just saying, like, how people are starting to get used to higher frame rates, and how not necessarily in theaters, but definitely on your home video. If you go from a high frame rate digital video to going and watching a movie, more and more people are starting to notice that it kind of looks stuttery until your eyes settle back into the lower frame rate. And that's what I meant by yet, is one day it might just become too obvious, or kind of the opposite. It just becomes the norm to the point where it looks like 80s, early 90s CGI again, sticking very vividly out from the regular film. But we all just cope with it because, well, that's what they're delivering. Anyways,
let's move on talking about CGI in the MCU to a trailer that features a lot of CGI in a Marvel movie, specifically Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, the latest in the Paul Rudd-led, I was going to say trilogy, but currently I guess it's a trilogy, but who knows how far this will go on. This latest adventure sees Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, making a deal with the devil, or making a deal with the Kang, the one of the Kang iterations here.
You missed an opportunity to say making a deal with the Conqueror, since he's Kang the Conqueror.
Yeah, that did. Oh, well. Making a deal with the Conqueror. And we don't know what that deal is, other than, it has to do with him reclaiming lost time with his daughter. As we know, he blipped. Or no, he didn't blip. He was 5 years. He spent 5 years in the quantum realm and lost, that time with his daughter, who grew up without him. And I guess he wants to reclaim it in some way. And I'm sure the message at the end of it will be like, hey, she's still there. She's right there. You may have missed 5 years, but she's still there, and she still loves you, but whatever. Anyways, this leads them into the quantum realm, into a whole nother stuff of things we don't really understand at this point, or we can only speculate. But it definitely seems to be easily the most ambitious Ant-Man films up until this point. These movies have essentially been palate cleansers at the tail end of one of the phases. It was a palate cleanser at the end of phase 2, and it was a palate cleanser right after Avengers Infinity War that helped realign things a little bit before diving back in. I guess Captain Marvel came after that, but
yeah,
we'll
it should have been
now.
a Black Widow movie.
Black Widow should have come out after Civil
Infinity
War. After Civil War
and Endgame. I mean, that could have been okay as well, but between Infinity War and Endgame at the very latest.
Agreed. Yeah, the Black Panther. The Black Widow movie is such a victim of its placement, which is silly to think of because it doesn't matter technically, but it kind of does. Still.
Yeah, but I would, how awesome and how much more mysterious and intriguing would it have been for Endgame to go exactly as it did with Captain Marvel showing up when she does, doing what she did. How freaking cool would it have been instead if that had been her intro? And all you got to do, there's only one quick change you got to add to this is Cap can't say Danvers. We could use an assist, and you have Rocket or Nebula, one of the cosmic characters, mention her. That's that Kree warrior. That's Captain Marvel. That's Carol Dan. However you want to do it to let the audience know what's going on. But there's your connection. You introduce her into Endgame. She helps in the big final fight. Then you do your flashback after Endgame for Captain Marvel 1 and carry on. There were so many ways to skin that cat. Please don't skin cats. It's awful. But there was so many more ways to do that other than putting Black Widow as late as you did and getting Captain Marvel out there to try to battle DC. I mean, come on now.
What did Captain Marvel have to do with Black Widow?
No, we're talking about Wonder Woman. Sorry. Marvel wanting to get a big and I don't know why Black Widow wouldn't be considered a big female lead, but to get
she's
there,
not super powered.
I guess. But like I said, I try to think of. I was trying to think of story more than social brownie points or whatever. I don't know how to phrase it. You and I both agree on the general purpose, on the premise.
But my point is that I was just curious. No, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We're talking about Ant-Man right now. This is going to be potentially the first that we actually really understand where Marvel is heading. We got glimpses of it, but they all kind of seem to contradict each other during Phase 4 between Loki, between the Spider-Verse movie and Doctor Strange. We expected those to sort of build off of each other, but they all just kind of seem to contradict each other in annoying ways. So with Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, bringing in Kang from Loki and dealing with potential multiversal consequences here, it seems like this could be it. And that's great. That's exciting. And I'm happy that Peyton Reed, who I know mentioned that he didn't want to be essentially do what he's been doing for the past 2 movies. He wanted an Avengers level story. And it sounds like this is kind of what we're getting. But this trailer doesn't get me excited. This trailer, while I could still see the movie being good and I'll still watch it, and who knows, maybe I'll still really love it, it was kind of just boring. I kind of zoned out in the middle of it. And I didn't feel a whole lot. It was a lot of cosmic just happening. And without me having any context, it was hard for me really to connect to it. And I can only imagine, us as fans were like, oh, that's Kang. Oh, that's MODOK. Wow, that's so cool. What is the majority of the world out there? Is this too weird for them? Is this too cosmic? Is this too just off the wall to be something they're interested in? What do you think, Kyle?
No, I think people are kind of into the quirkiness of Ant-Man. Sure, it's going quantum this time around.
I said cosmic, I meant quantum.
Yeah. It's going quantum more this time around than it did in the previous movie. It's still going to play off of a lot of physical comedy, I bet, and a lot of physical weirdness. I also didn't find it to be as intriguing or as, I don't want to use the word pleasant, but as pleasing. How about that? I didn't find it to be as pleasing as I had hoped, but I also think it's because of it's a Kang trailer, one, and then two, I'm still mad at how disconnected everything has been, and I have a little bit of knowledge that this trailer and the previous one have confirmed quite a few leaks that had been out there, and because of that, it's like, yeah, this might be another one of those cases where it's a relatively well executed movie. Sure, I could probably, if I could disconnect all of the things plugging into it, maybe enjoy it as a solo thing. But because of what's come before and how long it's going to take to get to what comes after, I'm nervous. I really am, and this trailer kind of.
So you've heard leaks that indicate it could just be more of the same from Phase 4 in terms of how things are connected, and that it won't be as connected as we want it to be.
Yeah, that's kind of the feels on it. Like they're gonna connect things, but it's not what the Infinity Stones did. You know what I'm saying? It's not what Nick Fury did. It's not what even Iron Man did, popping up in a Spider-Man movie and a Captain America movie. You know, it's very, you could almost say this was a afterthought type mentality, type connections. It's like, oh, we can connect these later on down the road type thing. So, and maybe it was planned from the get-go. It just feels like a really crappy plan, but I've got concerns. I hope it's good. I need it to be good. And I swear on my life, if Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 isn't good, if it's not a knockout home run, I'm not saying it has to be better than what came before, but it has to be as good, I will probably be done with Marvel. Because I can't take any more abuse like this, man. It sucks so bad.
You're so dramatic.
I want to love this stuff, man. I want to.
Phase 4 has not been great. I'll admit that. It's been mediocre, but abuse, Kyle.
Yes,
come on.
100%. Almost on the level of abuse that I suffered at the hands of Deborah Chow and Obi-Wan Kenobi.
All right. Well, that's all I have to say about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Let's go ahead and head into our review of M3GAN, where we will be adding in one fellow geekster here.
Really? I don't see him available.
No, he's not available now, but I figure we could take a break until he pops in.
Okay. Break then.
Break time. And we're back with our review of M3GAN, or 1.5 reviews of M3GAN, give or take. That's unfortunately Danny. Doesn't look like he'll be able to make it here, but he did bring me some of his thoughts to share. So first things first, let's do what we normally do and look at Rotten Tomatoes and see where things currently sit. As of right now, M3GAN is 95% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with critics, and interestingly enough, 79% fresh with audiences. So both have an overall a positive perspective on what this movie is, but there's a bit of a disconnect of how positive it is, at least if you're looking at it sort of the analog, the black and white aspect of it. The critics' consensus is the film is unapologetically silly and all the more entertaining for it. M3GAN is the rare horror comedy that delivers chuckles as effortlessly as chills. So M3GAN is a marvel of artificial intelligence, a lifelike doll programmed to be a greatest companion and a parent's greatest ally. Designed by a brilliant toy company roboticist, Gemma, M3GAN can listen and watch and learn as she becomes friend and teacher, playmate and protector for the child she is bonded to. When Gemma suddenly becomes the caretaker of her orphaned 8-year-old niece, Katie. Oh, it's spelled that way. Cady. I did not know that. Gemma's unsure and unprepared to be a parent. Under intense pressure at work, Gemma decides to pair her M3GAN prototype with Katie in an attempt to resolve both problems, a decision that will have unimaginable consequences. So Danny, as he didn't make it here, for him, he gave the film a C+. Now that sounds negative, but not fully. He says it was nothing special, but certainly fresh enough to make it worthy of a watch. Writers played fast and loose with some of the tech stuff. The A-team building of M3GAN in just a few hours, followed by "we'll have this in shops in 2 weeks," made me raise an eyebrow. Oh, and the stereotypical CEO was, without a doubt, the worst part of the movie. I laughed a lot, which I wasn't expecting to, so I appreciate some of the dark humor. So he gave it a C+. I like this movie significantly more than he did. I'm giving this movie an A-. I actually liked it quite a bit. This, to me, it delivered on exactly what it promised. It was a campy comedy horror film revolving around an AI doll killing people. That's what it promised in the trailer. And frankly, it doesn't really deliver much beyond that, but it wasn't promising that for me. At least on an external level. Like, it goes through all of the stereotypical beats you expect. You know, you have sort of the setup, you have the android introduced against, and maybe it's not something we don't want to do because it's too dangerous, but we do it anyway. And then shit starts to go off the rails, and then blah, it's there. Like, you can predict the story based on the premise alone. But the execution, I think, was so great and so solid that I just can't help but applaud the film. Like, I was entertained from very beginning to end and have very few problems with it. Yes, it does have some logic problems there with regards to, I guess, the timelines, but it's like a campy, kind of silly movie to the point where, whatever, I can just kind of brush that off. It doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. This isn't supposed to be realistic on that level. So on the whole, I would give it an A-. If you're going in there expecting what you get from that trailer, it delivers 100%. But I'll go ahead and hop into spoilers right now and just discuss a little bit more about why I like the movie so much. So if you haven't seen the film M3GAN, spoiler alert, I don't know if I'll dig too deep into them, but I want to be able to speak without having to worry about it. What I think this story really succeeds at more than anything else, and this kind of goes back, I think I've said this before on the podcast, and it has to do with emotional cores of a story. Good stories generally have two components. You have the story itself and you have the emotional core. And when we think of a movie, a lot of times we think about the story. Iron Man. Oh, this is a bad example because Iron Man is such a weird movie because it's structured so strangely. What's a better one? Spider-Man Homecoming. It's about him dealing with powers and trying to become on the Avengers, like that whole, and then this happens and story plot happens, but really it's about a boy learning to appreciate the moment in life that he is in and to slow down and not feel the need to constantly prove himself. It's all about what is the internal arc of this story. And for me, this one had a really great aspect to it with regards to trauma. And the main girl, Katie, or not the main girl, the young girl, Katie, and the importance of taking time to grieve, the importance of not just trying to drown your emotions in someone in distraction, not to distract yourself. And that's essentially what M3GAN does. Is she is a great distraction from her grief. But ultimately, as is said later on in the movie, when the girl kind of goes crazy when M3GAN isn't around, and her aunt's like, or she says to her aunt, "I don't feel like this when M3GAN's not around." And the aunt says, "You're supposed to feel this way. Your parents just died." And I think that is it's really awesome. It's really great in how it handles grief and how that's the focus of it. So because of that, you are probably witnessing in this very podcast the single male or the single man, the single person who cried in M3GAN. That's right. I shed a tear in this movie.
Oh my
because
God.
of that emotional core stuff. It was because it just handled it like.
Do you have
I'm
any
not going to
man
say it
cards
handled
left?
it particularly well.
If you have any man cards left, I need them now.
No. Do you even know me? No, I never had them to begin with. I feel like it's a couple of things. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm approaching middle age and I'm just being like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna, sorry, YouTube. I'm just gonna let it happen. I'm just gonna let the tears flow when it feels like it. Like when I have a little tingle in the back of my throat that makes me want to like cry, I'm just gonna lean into it and let it happen. So there's a mix of that, and then I think there's also almost like an actor. I've been writing a lot of stories, and when I do that, I always try to think of the emotional core and kind of I think I autocomplete a lot in my head of what these specific emotional core arcs mean and kind of relating them to my own personal experiences in a way that amplifies them. And I think that's probably part of what happens here. So I think it's really cool how it does that. And in the same way that I feel like you can look at this and be like, this is just a remake of every other killer robot AI doll story out there. Yes, it is. But it's kind of like Avatar, to where it's just a solid execution of a tried and true story. It's just very entertaining, very watchable, very, very fun. And I'm just happy that Blumhouse, who I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, they very much, I feel like, are doing a great service to the industry by having other movies that aren't just big budget explosion fests be in theaters and making a splash. So I just think that's really good for the industry. And an industry that restricts theaters to either really high or really low, that this is able to still be around. And obviously, I think this would fall under relatively low. I don't know what the budget of this thing is off the top of my head. Actually, let me look that up. M3GAN budget. I would be surprised if it was over 15 million. My guess would be less than 10. 12 million. 12 million. So, I wouldn't call it low budget, but it's lower budget for sure. Definitely not mid budget. And I'm just happy that there is a place in theaters for this type of story. This story just executes well on its promise. And I think while it doesn't expand outside the parameters of the plot of what you'd expect, I think it does go a little bit deeper in terms of emotion, in terms of what the main characters are going through and their arcs. As a result, I give this an A-. I'm really excited to watch it again when it comes out of theaters. Like, I'll buy it. This might be up there with me with Happy Death Day as far as there's fun horror-esque movies to revisit. I love those Happy Death Day movies. Was it you that recommended it to me? I think it was. I think so. Yeah.
I think it was. Loved it. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. I mean, I wouldn't say this is as good as that, because Happy Death Day is different in that I just think it has a unique concept, or it kind of mixes and mashes genres in a way that's fun and kind of campy and pokes fun at itself. This one, I think, is a little bit more down the road what you'd expect, I guess. You're not there for the twists and turns. You're there to kind of get what you're promised from that trailer. And then I just think it goes a little bit deeper than that in an effective way. But still, solid filmmaking from Blumhouse Productions. They continue to do amazing work. Anyways, that is it for this episode of Breaking Geek Radio, the podcast. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me and being my bouncing board of this episode. I know that's not what you signed on for, but I appreciate you stepping up to the plate and doing that when you could.
No problem. It was almost like an old episode of LR Mornings.
I know, just about. If you haven't checked out the rest of Genreverse Podcast Network, there are lots of shows, including Breaking Geek Radio, the podcast, Daily Cup of Genre, Anime-Versal Reviews, Anime-Versal or AVR Squared, Anime-Versal Reactions, Marvel Multiverse Mayhem, and Genre Shots. Right? Is that it?
Yeah. You forgot the Cantina. Close.
The Cantina.
Close.
The Cantina
Close.
is the other one here that you can check out. The Genreverse Podcast Network on YouTube, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Kyle, where can people find you?
Watching anime here on the Genreverse Podcast Network and at that Kamelon on Twitter, and check out our Discord. Link in the description box below.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter and TikTok at AJ Cerna Writer. You can also check out all of my books under the name AJ Cerna on Amazon and Audible. Check out my official website at magiabooks.com, magiabooks.com. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Breaking Geek Radio, the podcast. I have been Jammer, and I have been excited to return back to you at a later date. That didn't work, but whatever. Hasta lasagna, don't get any on ya. Mission accomplished.